Care for Children International, I extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you. I'm Sister Niluka Pereira, the coordinator of Catholic Care for Children International. Thank you for being a part of this important webinar. We are delighted to have you with us today. This webinar is available in English, French, Italian, and Spanish. You can choose your preferred language by clicking on the globe icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you like to listen to the interpreters only without the speaker's voice in the background, please select Mute Original Audio. Please note that the webinar will be recorded for future reference. Before we begin the webinar, let's invite God to be part of this conversation, to be present among us and guide us in the right direction. So he is the one who has brought us to this moment. To do so, I invite Sister Nirmala Arul to lead us in prayer. Sister Nirmala.
Thank you, Sister Niluka. Let's gently close our eyes for a second and become aware of ourselves, especially the uppermost thought. We thank God for today, for our lives, for our very existence. Let us remember today the people of Israel, Palestine, Ukraine, Russia, and all those who need of our prayers and peace. Especially the little children who are suffering, who have lost their lives. As we attend this webinar, we are aware that Synod session is going on in Rome. So let us join the universe and say this prayer wherever we are together, because this prayer used to be said at every session of the Second Vatican Council. Before you, Holy Spirit, as we gather together in your name, with you alone to guide us, make yourself at home in our hearts. Teach us the way we must go and how we are to pursue it. We are weak and sinful. Do not let us promote disorder. Do not let ignorance lead us down the wrong path, nor partiality influence our actions. Let us find in you our unity, so that we may journey together to eternal life and not stray from the way of truth and what is right. All this we ask of you, who are at work in every place and time, in the communion of the Father and the Son, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sister Nirmala, for leading us in prayer. For those of you who are new to our webinars, let me give you a brief overview. Catholic Care for Children International is an initiative of the Union of International Superiors General, UISG. UISG is a member organization The members are the superiors general of the women religious congregations. Our mission, the mission of the CCCI, is to help religious congregations make their charism of care relevant in today's world. This is an extremely important initiative of the UISG because we could see across the globe care reform is gaining momentum. This shift is informed by insights from social sciences and changes in international and national legal frameworks, all pointing towards a move away from institutions and towards family-based care solutions for children in need of care and protection. As of the most recent Vatican Statistic Yearbook in 2020, we have seen that there are nearly 10,000 Catholic-sponsored institutions worldwide that serve many thousands of children. At this time, we see an encouraging development with women and men religious coming together to improve care for children. We are particularly encouraged, inspired by the women and men religious in Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, and Malawi. They are taking the lead, guided by their national associations, to become champions of care reform. Together, they are working to reduce recourse to institutions and embrace family solutions for the children who need care and protection. So today's webinar, Living the Charism, Reforming the Care, focuses on a study conducted in 4 countries, Uganda, Kenya, Zambia, and Malawi. This study describes Catholic-sponsored care for children in Eastern Africa. It uses data from these 4 countries to understand the situation of children who are separated from their families and living in institutional settings. Moreover, it aims to highlight the dedicated efforts of men and women religious in creating family-like environments for these children moving away from institutional care. We believe that this webinar will provide valuable insights and shed light on transitioning towards family-based care and addressing the challenges on this journey. So our panelists for today include 3 CCCI leaders from Uganda, Kenya, and Zambia, as well as the consultant who conducted the study. You will get to know them shortly. Kathleen Mahoney will be moderating today's webinar. Kathleen Mahoney, along with consultant Nicole Moran, co-authored this important document, Regional Portrait, Catholic Care for Children in Eastern Africa, which serves as the foundation for today's discussion. So now I invite Kathleen Mahoney, the moderator of today's webinar, to take the lead. Over to you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Sister Niluka. And hello to everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. It is really an honor to be with you today and to be the moderator for this webinar. Before we get started, we will have our panelists introduce themselves, and then Nicole Moran will provide a summary of the regional portrait. After that, we're going to hear from 3 sisters who lead Catholic Care for Children programs in Uganda, Zambia, and Kenya. And they're going to share their stories of how they have advanced care reform in their respective countries. We're going to leave time at the end for your questions. So as we go along, please feel free to post any questions or comments you might have in the chat box, and we'll see if we can get to them at the end of our session. Please keep in mind that today's discussion is being recorded and translated. And if you haven't done so already, you can look for the icon at the bottom of your screen and choose your preferred language. All of today's speakers are going to be speaking in English, and we'll send out recordings later in English, French, and Spanish through email in case there are those who weren't able to join today. Let's first begin with some brief introductions of our panelists. We'll ask each of our panelists to introduce herself at this point. And we'll turn first to Nicole Morin. Nicole, a few words about yourself, please.
Thank you, Kathleen. So, hello to everybody. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Nicole Moran. I'm sitting in Ireland, and I work as a consultant mainly with religious congregations. And for the past 2 years, I have been involved with Catholic Care for Children. I carried out 2 evaluations of Catholic Care for Children Kenya and Uganda with my colleague Nyokabi Kahura. And now, more recently, as Sister Niluka said, I co-authored the regional portrait together with Kathleen Mahoney. So I'm delighted to be here with you today.
Thank you, Nicole. And now let's hear from Sister Euphrasia.
Thank you, Kathleen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm Sister Euphrasia Masika. I belong to the Institute of the Daughters of St. Teresa of the Child Jesus, and I work under the program Catholic Care for Children in Uganda as a director, and this is a program under the Association of the Religious in Uganda. You are most welcome.
Thank you, Sister Euphrasia. And now we'll turn to Sister Delvin in Kenya. Sister Delvin, would you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Kathleen. Good morning, good afternoon. I'm Sister Delphine Mukwana. My congregation is Daughters of the Heart of Mary. I'm the program manager for the Catholic Care of Children in Kenya. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Delvin. And our final panelist is Sister Catherine, who is coming to us from Zambia.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I am Sister Catherine Polokoso. I belong to the congregation of the Little Servants of the Blessed Virgin Mary, conceived immaculate. I work for the association, Zambia Association of Sisterhoods, here in Zambia, under one of its projects, Catholic Care for Children in Zambia. I work as a coordinator of the project. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Catherine. And my name is Kathleen Mahoney. I live in the United States, and I am recently retired and getting used to saying I'm now retired. Until recently, I worked as a senior program officer at GHR Foundation, which is based in the United States. And that's how I came to know the Catholic Care for Children movement. And it's been a delight to get to know Sister Niluka as well as the CCC teams across the globe. Thank you very much. And we're going to begin now by taking a closer look at the regional portrait. As Sister Niluka described, it is a study of Catholic care for children in Uganda, Kenya, Malawi, and Zambia. And we're going to look at it to gain some insights on care reform from each of our speakers. But first, we'll hear from Nicole. Nicole, as someone who's been deeply involved in conducting the study, and I had the privilege of being the co-author of the study with Nicole, we'd ask you if you could help us by sharing some of the key findings from the study, especially about the way that the Catholic community is changing the way it is caring for children, moving away from institutions and more towards family and community-based care. And what were some of the factors that helped leaders in these 4 countries to bring about those changes? So we'll turn it over to you, Nicole.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'm happy to share some insights to the regional portrait. And So at the heart of this regional portrait are the leaders and their teams around Catholic care for children, and in each of the 4 countries in Eastern Africa. So Uganda, which started Catholic care for children in 2016, and then it was followed by Zambia, which started their program in 2017, and Kenya in 2018. And this year, Catholic care for children Malawi was launched. And in each country, the Catholic care for children programs are a project of the National Association of Religious, and they are set up as a team of about 3 to 4 people, staff, with their leaders. Like the sisters who are with us today, Sister Euphrasia, Sister Catherine, and Sister Delvin. So, and as you said, Kathleen, I will now briefly present some data on Catholic-sponsored care for children in these 4 countries, and also highlight the changes that have been achieved so far and what has driven the change. Oops, sorry. So Catholic care for children has identified in Kenya 145 Catholic-sponsored childcare institutions and programs, 32 in Malawi, 43 in Uganda, and 33 in Zambia. And we are confident to say that almost all institutions and most of the programs were identified. However, mapping is ongoing. And there are different types of childcare institutions and programs across the 4 countries. But what is in common is that these are institutions and programs involved in childcare. So institutions are residential. So for example, there are baby homes and children homes. And you can see here in the second line how many percent, like for example in Kenya, 88% of the childcare institutions and programs are residential childcare institutions. And in terms of institutions, it can be said that around 15% of all childcare institutions in these 4 countries operate under the Catholic umbrella. And then besides the childcare institutions, there are also childcare programs. And these are, for example, community-based programs and family outreach activities. And many have the aim to strengthen families and communities to prevent children from being placed in institutions and also to prevent secondary separation. And that means if a child returns from an institution back to their family, to make sure that it's safe and that it can stay in their family. And if we look at the institutions and programs, we can see that a third, so 32% of the Catholic-sponsored childcare institutions and programs in the 4 countries serve children and some adults with disabilities. And these are, for example, small homes or rehabilitation centers or annex schools. And in Kenya, for example, 27% of the institutions and programs focus on caring for children with disabilities, almost 50% in Uganda, and around 60% in Zambia. And disability is a common reason why children are placed in institutions. But among other push and pull factors like related to children's survival, development, and protection, but also related to parents' ability to care for children. And if we look now who owns these institutions and programs, we can see that 53% are owned by women and 8% are owned by men religious. So in total, 61% are owned by religious and 36% are owned by dioceses. And who is running, or I mean, if you look at who runs or manages those childcare institutions and programs, it's very clear. The majority are managed by religious, 84%, 8% by men religious, and 76% by women religious. And congregations of women religious manage more childcare institutions and programs than they own. So as you saw in the previous slide, if you remember, women religious own 53% of childcare institutions and programs, but they manage 76%. So this is because dioceses not only rely also on sisters to manage their childcare institutions. And there are nearly 10,000 children in Catholic-sponsored residential care in the 4 countries. So there are more than 12,000 children are supported, as 10,000 children are supported in institutions, and then we have 12,000 children that are supported at community level without being in institutional care. So there are at least 22,000 children in Catholic-sponsored residential care, all participating in their programs. And we say at least because we don't have a full account of all the children in Kenya, not yet. Then, since the start of Catholic Care for Children, at least 3,650 children have been reunited with their families, or placed in alternative care in Uganda, Kenya, and Zambia. And the majority of the children were reunited with their biological parents or relatives. And there's only a small percentage which were placed in foster care or which were adopted. So the majority of the 3,650 children which were reunited with their families are now with their biological families and parents and relatives. So the Catholic-sponsored childcare institutions and programs provide at least one or more of the services listed on this slide. So they, for example, provide education, schooling to the children, or healthcare. And if we look at the staff who work in these institutions and programs, we can see that between 20 and 30% of the staff in the childcare institutions and programs are religious, and between 70 and 80% are lay. And before the Catholic Care for Children program started, they conducted rapid assessments, and they found that staff had low levels of trainings, and most staff had little or no formal training in case management and child safeguarding, and few had social work training. So, and to respond to the need for more capacities, and also to respond to the need to meet the care reform requirements, Catholic Care for Children has added significant capacity among Catholic care providers. So more than 200 religious, mainly sisters, in total 271, have undertaken university-level studies in social work and related fields. And more than 800 religious and lay people have been trained in professional case management practices. And over 500 have been introduced to the basics of child safeguarding. And there have been also many other trainings, for example, on caring for children with disabilities, and also on resource mobilization. And what was also very supportive, and what is very important, is that the staff of the Catholic Care for Children programs, so for example, the project managers or the case managers, they visit the childcare institutions on a regular basis to advise and mentor the staff as they are transitioning. And besides all this capacity development, there was also a lot of awareness raising done on the importance of care reform. So at least 6,000 stakeholders were reached: congregational leaders, community members, government officials, and also staff working in schools or healthcare centers. And as a result of the capacity development and also this awareness raising, and also the mentoring which is done, provided ongoing by the Catholic Care for Children teams, the quality of care in the childcare institution is improving, with growing alignment to national and international standards. And one example would be, for example, that more childcare institutions are now registered and meet minimum standards. So in Uganda, for example, When Catholic Care for Children Uganda started their work, only 10% of the childcare institutions which participated were registered with the government, and now 100% of them are registered. So professional standards were introduced or strengthened, and this can be, for example, seen. One example would be that there is now more robust gatekeeping. So at the start of Catholic Care for Children, what could be observed in many childcare institutions was that the gates of the homes were wide open to get in, but too closed to get out. So now it's the other way around. So fewer children are admitted to childcare institutions and more children are reintegrated with families. And as a result, care providers are beginning to reimagine how the charism of care might find new expressions. So, for example, through outreach work or having day schools or nurseries. And another example is of more professional standards is more systematic record keeping. So now proper records are kept for each child. And what can also be observed is that more family tracing efforts are in place, starting from the day a child is admitted to the childcare institutions. We can also see that parents and guardians are much more involved and there is more attention given to family strengthening. And there are also now stronger ties to different stakeholders. So for example, the government or other like-minded organizations, or also stronger ties to the different stakeholders at community level. And child protection and safeguarding are an integral part of Catholic Care for Children. And the training in child protection and safeguarding helps the childcare institutions to understand the link with care reform. And it helps them to embrace care reform and to keep the best interest of the child always in their mind, during care in the institution, on the journey home, and also at home. And to conclude, I wish to highlight a few points. One, so Catholic Care for Children is really now providing an organized, collaborative platform for ongoing participation and contribution to care reform. So Catholic Care for Children has given religious and by extension the wider Catholic community an identity, a voice, and a platform in care reform. And we can see and say that Catholic-sponsored care for children in Eastern Africa is moving towards fuller alignment with international and national frameworks for care. So such as the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, and also the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, or national policies, as they all call for children to be in families and not in institutions. So what are the factors that have helped sisters to move from institutional to family and community-based care? So first, it's winning hearts and minds, and which is really a precondition for care reform, the need to convince everybody of the necessity for care reform. Second, it's capacity development, which improves the speed and the quality of care reform. Then the importance of collaboration and partnership. So care reform cannot take place in a vacuum and cannot be done alone. It is too complex and many stakeholders and partners are needed. And they have to be involved, like the church, the government, like-minded organizations. Then we have family strengthening, and it's a must. And at the same time, it's tackling the root causes of family separation is a challenge. And for this, a comprehensive approach is needed, involving different stakeholders. Then we have mobilization of resources. So the majority of childcare institutions are underfunded And this is a challenge as it impacts the pace and sustainability of transitioning, and it also impacts on the well-being and safety of children. So for example, if you are short on funding, it is difficult to travel to visit families for assessments, or it's also difficult to have the money to do follow-up visits. And once a child has been reunited, and to see if the child is okay family. And as the last point, as the foundation is the charism of the religious congregations, which is the being and doing of religious. And the calls that sisters hear through their charism in this day and time encourages them to take care of children outside of institutions. So to sum up, the key drivers of change we see is winning hearts and minds, capacity development, collaboration, partnership, family strengthening, resource mobilization, and the charism as a foundation. And I will end now my presentation with this slide. And I thank you very much for listening. Thank you.
Nicole, thank you very much for summarizing the report. And if you would like to see the full report, of course, you can look on the CCCI website. Let's now turn to Sister Euphrasia in Uganda. Sister Euphrasia, Uganda has made tremendous strides reintegrating children with their families and also beginning to evolve, change models of care. So we'd like to ask you, how did CCCU go about winning hearts and minds and convincing people that change was really important, that it was in the best interest of the children? And how have you equipped sisters and other workers so that they could undertake this transition? Sister Euphrasia, over to you now.
Thank you, Kathleen, once more, and welcome everyone to our webinar of today and this topic in particular, winning hearts and minds. Catholic Care for Children in Uganda is a program under the Association of the Religious in Uganda, and was born way back in 2016 when care reform agenda was taking root in Uganda. And one of our laws was the Children Act as it was amended 2016. Care reform is guided by the international legal framework that accords primacy to children living residential care and living in family or community-based care, where we know that they thrive up to their full potential. And this can be traceable in the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, the United Nations Guidelines on the Alternative Care of Children, the African Charter, just among many. Child care reform calls really for winning hearts and minds of key stakeholders and building their capacity to enable them work to the best interest of the child. And we are going to take an operational definition of winning hearts and minds as, you gain approval or you gain the support, you convince someone to be on your side if you are to achieve what you want. So winning hearts and minds literally meant we had to convince the superiors general, these are the owners of the child care institutions. Other child care institutions were owned by the bishops, others by the priests. So we had to make sure we win their hearts on our side so that together we can champion child care reform. So these categories had different fears. And so we are going to see why did we have to work towards winning their hearts and minds. Category number 1 includes superiors general and their religious sisters. Sisters work inspired by their charism to take care of vulnerable children. So when care reform laws and guidelines came into force, the sisters were afraid. They thought their charisms were being compromised. When they thought of transitioning from residential care to family care, they could not believe that the children they had taken care of for all many years, now we tell them that these children should go back to families. So it was a shock to them. It was not an easy way. It was a shock to the sisters because some child care institutions had been in existence, for instance, over 50 years. We have Ngokonjero Providence Home had been in existence for over 87 years. St. Philomena, 61 years. Others over 50 years. So sisters had developed attachment to these children. And now telling them to go back, it wasn't easy. We had to convince them of the new law. And we had to win their hearts to be on our side. Some child care institutions would be closed if we had not convinced the sisters to embrace child care reform because they were operating illegally. And as owners who provide resources for these child care institutions, ranging from land, from buildings, their human resource. So we had to make sure that they are on our side, that they embrace care reform if they were to continue providing resources to these child care institutions. We needed their blessing, we needed their permission, otherwise we couldn't do anything with child care institutions without the permission, without the blessing of the owners. And the owners are mainly the bishops and the religious superiors, the major superiors. A second category that we had to win hearts are the administrators, the social workers, and the caregivers. These are people who work in child care institutions on a daily basis. These also had developed an attachment to the children. You imagine they had been with children for many years. Now time comes and you tell them to take children back home. They could not believe it. And they were afraid. They knew that children would not thrive in families as they were doing in institutional care. These workers also were afraid of losing their jobs because if children went home, definitely it means there was less work for them. So they could not easily let children go. And so it was our work to make sure we convince them, we interest them that child care reform is the way to go. And since they were the implementers, we also had to tell them the plain truth that their child care institutions would be closed if they did not comply. And so we are working tooth and nail to make sure we convince them to embrace care reform. The third category of stakeholders whose hearts and minds we had to work hard to win were the parents, the guardians, and the communities. You know, preparing children to go back, you have also to go to the family to get them prepared to receive the child and to assess whether they are in position to take care of the child. These were expressing inability to continue with the standards children had acquired at child care institutions. Children were used now to good feeding, to proper beddings, quick medical care. Others were in schools. So when we talked to the parents, the guardians, the community that children should come back home, they expressed the inability of sustaining these standards. But we had to work hard to make sure we convince them that it will be possible. Another category of the stakeholders that we had to convince, whose hearts we had to win, are the children themselves. You prepare the child to go back home. And these children, especially those of reasoning age, were also fearful. They would imagine going back to the same families, to the same communities, where maybe abuse or harm happened. So imagine telling someone, you are going back to the home, and the child knows this is the home where I was abused. So we had to work hard to prepare the children to convince them, to tell them that now it's okay, that we have worked on the push factors and that the families are ready to receive them. And this involves you take the child for bonding so that she or he can really prove that the home is now safe for him or her. So the old people who are to live now independent living, like the abandoned children, they were fearing venturing into society. Imagine a child has maybe lived up to 17 years in a child care institution. Now he imagines he's going to live in a rented house, or you have been able to put up a small house for him or her. So they would get afraid of venturing into the unknown society. And so we had a lot of work to help them, to convince them, to interest them, to make trials, to go and live in the community, and then eventually they had to comply. So how did we win these people's minds and hearts? Like, what were the strategies that we used to win their minds and hearts? In the first place, we had to interest them. Someone must get interested in what he or he is to comply with. Otherwise, if he's not interested, however much you say, he will remain, non-compliant. So we had to use all the ways possible. And one of them were the social sciences. We were sharing with them findings of studies that were conducted, which were enumerating the long-term effect on children who has been living long in institution care. And then we had also to base on the biblical text of and Catholic social teaching that family is God's original design for children's development and protection. So as religious, they must know that according to God, children should live in families. We are also using the Catholic social teaching on human dignity that points out that the family is the original and fundamental unit in society where children grow to their full potential. And the channels we used to sensitize these stakeholders, we could call workshops, we could hold workshops at our secretariat, that is central level. We would move down to regional level, especially to child care institution level, so that we involve the parents and the caregivers. We would mobilize through local leaders in the communities. We would gather community members to sensitize them about the new global shift from residential care to community care. Many times we would use the radio to capture wide listenership so that those who may not have heard about it through the other channels, at least through the radio talk shows, they would also come to learn about the importance of shifting from residential care to family care. Many times we used places of worship. This is where we know that when a religious leader stands and says something, the worshippers will take it to heart. And then there we had to go into capacity building. We have had many of our social workers did not have the capacity, the skill, the knowledge. We went into capacity building, short term and long term. As we talk, 88 religious have been trained in social work. We did not stop at the religious. We also looked at the family members themselves. We trained the family members in positive parenting, others on how to care for children with disabilities. We trained them in income enterprises to boost their household income and be able to cater for their family needs. We also offer psychosocial support, spiritual counseling, and guidance. And what are the changes we have realized? There is a change of attitude towards family-based care, which has resulted into 1,443 children being reintegrated. Parents have accepted their children back. This is a change, a big change that we really appreciate, that parents now have taken the responsibility of their children. There is change in best care practices. And then there is the increased knowledge after capacity building has helped the sisters mainly to offer their work in the best interest of the child and to maintain gatekeeping so that only those children, especially the abandoned, are the only one who can be admitted. And the last one, there is enhancement of unity among religious institutes and collaboration with other partners which were not there in the beginning because each institute was working in isolation. And those childcare institutions that have had many children reintegrated in families, now there is a clear plan for repurposing these childcare institutions into community-based programs that will still benefit the child. And all this is because we worked hard to convince them, to interest them, and won their hearts. I thank you.
Sister Euphrasia, thank you very much for describing so many things that you've undertaken and how effective it's been. We're now going to hear from Sister Delvin. Sister Delvin, the Kenyan government has already announced that it's closing orphanages within the next 10 years. And that's a very ambitious goal. And they're already getting started. What is AOSK, the Association of Sisterhoods of Kenya, and CCCK doing to contribute to that really ambitious goal? Over to you, Sister Delvin.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, indeed. The government of Kenya has a 10-year strategic plan to reintegrate children back into their families. And of course, already 1 year has gone, is 9 years remaining, so to speak. The religious women in Kenya under the Associations of Sisters of Kenya began the journey of care reform in 2018. It was a time when the government had already abolished registration of charitable children institutions. And institutions that were registered were asked to start reintegrating children back into their families. That is in 2016. AOSK, through Catholic Care for Children program, has brought together congregational superiors, charitable children institutions, administrators, and created awareness of care reforms. And we have asked them to take the lead as their decision makers in matters of congregations. And through that, we won their hearts and minds, and all have embraced care reforms. We went ahead to support 48 congregations of sisters to develop their child protection policy, especially those who had a charism of care and had no legal framework in place in regard to the safeguarding of minors. This was to ensure that children are safeguarded and congregations are operating within minimum standards of care. We also brought together all CCI administrators of men and women religious congregations and those of the dioceses. We've created a synergy for care reform of 145 CCIs across the country. We have continued to capacity build the social workers, caregivers, and administrators in various courses and topics in support of the implementation of care reforms. Some of the training we offer to them include case management for successful reintegration, care, protection, and transitioning of children living with disability, documentation, counseling, social work, resource mobilization, and donor transitioning, among others. The administrators were taught how to plan for repurposing of their assets as they embarked on a care reform journey. Children are also being sensitized and helped to undertake that family is the ideal place for them to grow. as well as forming and mentoring them to be our champions of care reform through sports and arts, just to ensure that children's voice and participation is key. A total of 29 sisters have graduated with diplomas and certificates in social work, and as now 12 are ongoing with their degree course in social work at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, as we call it, QUER. Moreover, 39 sisters graduated in sustainable children rights and post-institutional care, a certificate course developed in collaboration with Catholic University of Eastern Africa to help the sisters accelerate care reform. Also, we are finalizing the development of the degree course together with the university that will attract many students to train in the care and the protection of children with the interest of care reforms. This is to prepare the workforce for care reform, and we have seen it help us achieve our goal of holistic family and community-based care with over 2,000 children reintegrated back to their families. The Association of Sisters of Kenya has also supported CCIs in putting in place the legal frameworks needed in also renewal of their institutions with the National Council for Children's Services. They were taught safeguarding and care of minors and were helped to create their databases for safe documentation and ease case management of children. There is also a centralized database at the association, which is aligned to the government's case management process to support the CCIs adhere to the government's case management requirements. We are collaborating with the county government in the office of the county commissioners to sensitize the communities on care reform. Also, administrators of CCIs who are trained as TOTs are sensitizing parents and families on positive parenting as a way of gatekeeping to prevent children from being separated from their parents and communities. We are spearheading in collaboration with the Association of Member Episcopal Conference in Eastern Africa, that's AMESEA, to win the hearts and minds of bishops' conferences in the region, which has seen tremendous acceptance from bishops to champion care reforms. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sister Delvin, thank you very much for letting us hear about what you've been doing in Kenya, where care reform is already underway at the government level. And of course, sisters are already taking the lead in those efforts. And now we're going to go to Zambia. We're going to hear from Sister Catherine. Sister Catherine, from the very beginning of CCCZ in Zambia, you've been working very closely with other stakeholders, and you've been doing some very, very thorough pilot programs, transitioning children back into families, making sure that they're well taken care of. Let us hear a little bit about how CCCZ works with other stakeholders and partners to ensure that children can grow up in safe and nurturing families.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and welcome listeners to our webinar. Jesus, our model, is the one who sets before us the example on how we are to work in collaboration, in partnership with others, when he appointed his 12 disciples. And after appointing his 12 disciples, Jesus told his disciples not to be afraid, for he was always with them. It is the same with us. As we are responding to the care reforms, we don't need to be afraid. Our resource mobilization is very important as we are transitioning the children from the child care facilities back into their families or family-like environments. The family being the best place for a child to grow from as proved by the social sciences, and it's also encouraged by the Catholic social teaching of the Church. Our care reforms cannot be done in isolation or by a single congregation alone. No, it requires a multi-sectoral approach. As an African proverb says, if we are to walk far, we need to walk alone. But if we are to achieve not, we need to work with others. And this is what we are doing as Catholic Care for Children here in Zambia. Catholic Care for Children in Zambia is working with like-minded partners, organizations in reintegrating the children back into their family or family-like environment. The partners bring on board their specialities in ensuring that that one child is reintegrated back in the family and that child is safe. The partners that we are working with include Catholic Care for Children in Zambia ourselves, as Zambia Association of Sisterhoods. We are also working with Catholic Relief Services, Save the Children International, Alliance for Children Everywhere in Zambia. We are working with Care. We are working with the sitting government, and we are also working with donors. Save the Children International are specialized in positive parenting. So whenever we are in need of such skills, positive parenting skills for our parents who are taking their children, for our guardians, for the caregivers in the child care institution, we always call upon Save the Children to help us facilitate this specialty. Alliance for Children Everywhere are specialized in identifying and training the families who are interested in taking the children for foster care and adoption. So in case one of our child care facility has children who needs to go for adoption, we call upon Alliance for Children Everywhere in Zambia to help us facilitate the activity. And ourselves as the association, we are specialized in counseling of the children and also sensitizing the communities on the importance of care reforms. So in case any of our partners are interested in our services, they'll call upon us and we will facilitate the counseling of the child as well as the families. The government of Zambia are the custodians of the children who are found in all our child care facilities. So the government ensures that the facilities abide to the standards of the government. The government ensures that the facility is registered, the facilities have got the policies, and the facilities are able to follow the policies. The admission of a child into the child care facility always starts with the government. The government will identify a facility where this child can go. And through identification of a child care facility, the child care facility now becomes the custodian of that child. When it comes to the monitoring of different activities that are done for this child to go back into their family, activities such as family tracing, family assessment, and ensuring that the case of a child is closed, we work in collaboration with the government. The government has to monitor the activities and has to ensure that the child is safe and the case can be closed. As earlier mentioned on, reintegrating of a child is very expensive. It cannot be done by one person. We need donors to help us with the financial support to ensure that we do our family tracing and assessment well. For this activity of reintegration here in Zambia has got no fund attached to it. Other stakeholders that we are working with are the congregation leaders. As we have seen from the port of these child care facilities are owned by the religious congregations. So every year we hold a meeting with all the religious leaders to discuss on issues, to discuss on the importance of changing the way we care. On a national level, we have started our conversation with the bishops. Through them, we want to reach out parishes and small Christian communities. With this arrangement, we want to enhance a gatekeeping mechanism and sensitization. With the child care facility, we always encourage our child care facility to do a community mapping because a lot of resources are found within the community. So in the community, the sisters are working with the grassroots levels who are a structure that is recognized by the government. These structures help the child care facilities in family tracing. They help them also to identify the families, the possible families where these children can go back. In the communities, we find a lot of schools. A child care facility is supposed to provide education for these children. So the child care facilities are encouraged to work with the schools around so that they help the children with the education support that the children are in need of, health support that the children are in need of. We are also working with the leaders, traditional leaders, and leaders from different churches. Apart from working with these structures, we are also working with the protection unity under the Ministry of Legal and Support. As Catholic Care for Children in Zambia, we have continued to work with the spiritual leaders. These spiritual leaders, they help us to provide the spiritual support from the children, for the children, so that this child, before it's taken home, the child is well prepared holistically. We cannot achieve our goal without engaging the parents or the families where these children are coming from. So as a program, we are working with different families of the children who are in the child care facilities. Immediately, a child is admitted to a child care facility. As facilities, we encourage the facility directors to build the relationship, and this relationship is done through the interaction by calling the families where these children are coming from. And also, we are encouraging the facilities to be visiting the children frequently and also holding the family conferencing sessions and counseling the families on the reasons why a child was separated from the family. If necessary, we are also encouraging the child to go for holidays, especially during the holiday times, so that a child can get familiar with the family and the environment around. In all our interventions, a child is a key player in the process. At all stages, the child is involved depending on the age of a child. Our interventions are always in the best interest of a child The voice of a child is considered in every decision making, and a child is well prepared through counseling. Thank you so much for listening.
Sister Catherine, thank you very much. Our participants, you've been able to hear from 3 sisters and how they've been able to work with many, many stakeholders to transition children from institutions back into family settings. And you've heard how they've built the capacity, especially among sisters, through many types of training, especially in social work, and how they've been winning hearts and minds. We'll give each one just 1 more minute. We'll go one more time around to hear from each sister. We're running a little bit behind schedule, so we'll ask our sisters to try and be brief, and we'll ask them from the perspective of being a sister and being a member of a religious institute and being part of a faith community. Could you offer your reflections from that perspective about the work that you're undertaking for children? And here, I think we'll go to Sister Catherine first and ask you just for a few thoughts before we go to questions. And in the meantime, if any of our listeners would like to pose a question, please do so in the chat box. But let's hear from Sister Catherine, just a wrap-up word or two.
Thank you so much, Catherine. As religious, we realize that we have the charism of care. This charism, when we talk about the charism, these are the spiritual gifts that our religious leaders had when they started the mission of caring. But it is the same spirit that all of us have. God has given us different spirits, different gifts, and it is with these gifts that we are supposed to bring that goodness to the people we are serving. So responding to the times that we are in, looking at the time that we are on, we have realized that we need to change the model of care from institution care to family-centered, because the Bible tells us that the family should be a unit where a child can grow from. And as we are embarking on the care reforms, this is what we want to achieve. We want to see that child growing up into the family, a loving family, where parents, guardians are able to give these values that cannot be totally given in the child care facility. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sister Catherine. Sister Delvin.
Thank you, Kathleen. For me, reading Signs of the Time basically means that religious women are to re-listen to what is a call of Christ today, which is the voice of the vulnerable children whose needs in the past decades were rescuing and caring for them away from their families. But now it is to take care of them from within their families and communities. So this implies that the charism of caring for consecrated persons is more demanding than before, as you would think. The pastoral issues have widened, and family apostolate is a need of the time. Therefore, a lot of evangelization on family as an institution that gives life ought to care and protected that very life through care and love, which the religious have to respond to by strengthening the families. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you, Sister Delvin. And a final word from Sister Euphrasia. You're muted, Sister Euphrasia.
Sorry, thank you, Kathleen, and our listeners. As religious today, I think when we look at the long-term effects on children, physically, socially, we are doing more harm than good if we keep them in residential care. Because as in the past, we only cared for children at the residential care. But today, reading the Signs of the Time, our expression of charism in the new way that it is now demanding us to move an extra mile, going to the family which was not being done in the past, because we just kept the children closed within our boundaries. But now, today, we have to move out to go and prepare the family before the child is taken. So this is, we are given more pastoral work than before, which I'm proud of, that now we can move out of our homes and move out to the families to prepare them, to counsel them, to support them economically so that they are ready to receive children back. So to me, I'm happy about the care reform and the changes that it has brought on board. And I call upon my fellow religious out there that we do more harm to keep children in residential care than when we leave them to go and live in families. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Euphrasia. We've had a question about working with religious and congregations. And the question was posed to Zambia, that when you've been working with congregations, have you experienced any resistance or challenges working with the congregations themselves?
Thank you so much, Charity. Thank you so much, Catherine. Challenges are always there. Even at the moment, we are having challenges with certain congregations who feel when we take the children back into their communities and families, we are running away from their charism. So that's why in my presentation, I said we are journeying with these congregations because it is not easier. Today, we just tell them to say, take the children back. And the other thing that is helping us, like for now here in Zambia, is the Children's Code Act that was enacted last year in August. In this act, there's one clause which is telling the institutions that the maximum time they can keep a child is 6 months. So as I'm talking now, congregations are calling on the office to say, how best can we integrate these children back?
Thank you,
so
Sister.
much.
Thank you, Catherine. So it sounds like you're providing support through the CCCZ team, but also reminding them that there are new laws in place and that governments have enacted standards for care and the importance of complying with those standards. Thank you, Sister Catherine. We've also had a question. It's a similar question, and it comes from Sister Shamandani, who asks, what sort of modes or approaches have you used to win the hearts and minds of religious men and women? So maybe Sister Euphrasia, could I turn that question over to you? How do you win the hearts and minds of women and men religious?
Thank you, Sister Shamindan. I think in my presentation, I was saying we used like 3 approaches. One, we are referring to the global shift, which comes along with legal implication for non-compliance. And we are lucky that in Uganda, the government was putting really padlocks on some child care institutions if they refused to comply. So it was one way that we are using to say, unless you comply, your child care institutions will be closed, because the government was behind our move. So we are winning their hearts saying, unless you comply, your child care institutions will be closed by the government, because they know they cannot operate without the government's approval. Another one, as religious, who are quoting the Bible, who are quoting the Catholic social teachings. So there was a lot of rigorous sensitization in a nutshell, that we did a lot of sensitization. And sensitization is not a one-off activity. It's really an ongoing, even up to today, because like spirits come in, spirits go out. So we keep on, we make sure every year there is one day when we call bishops and spirits general, and we re-echo what you have been talking in the past. So we use studies. When we share with them, the long-term effects on children, then you really see that we are doing more harm in keeping children in residential care than if we let them go and live in families. Thank you. So in a nutshell, we did a lot of sensitization.
So Sister Euphrasia, you're talking about, in addition to the government being motivation, it's also the social sciences which have demonstrated how important it is for children to grow up in safe and nurturing families. Sister Delvin, is there anything you'd like to add about working with congregations or trying to convince women and men religious that it's sometimes a difficult change, but it's important to change? Anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Kathleen. Of course, they have Sister Euphrasia and the rest have answered to what I will have responded to. But one of the key thing is that we have been using the cases of caregivers. Caregivers' experiences have been key because we relate this to them and we ask them to compare and see, as women religious or men religious, are they promoting life? And looking at the social teaching of the church, we are called upon to give the dignity of human life and sacredness of life. So are we doing that? So when we try to engage them in that, then they realize and they see the importance of them being part and parcel of care reform, and therefore we win their hearts easily. And they come along with us realizing, yes, there's something that they have been doing. They have been denying children their rights, and therefore they have a responsibility to correct or rectify so that they express their charisms of care better.
Thank you, Sister Delvin. There are two questions that have been posted that are somewhat similar. One asks about a time frame. What happens? Are there time frames for institutions to make this transition? And what happens if they don't? But the second question says, imagine your country is sort of stuck. The family policy is still, it hasn't been approved. This country, they have a draft since 2019. And because it's only a draft, children are brought to the homes and the community decides. But what can be done in the meantime? And so it's really about whether your country has enacted the laws or it still has draft laws. What happens if you don't meet the standards or if your country doesn't have standards? Any thoughts on those two questions?
Thank you, Kathleen. I will wish to answer to that. Of course, the government has got a responsibility to ensure that all people comply, that children are taken good care of, protected, and they're returned back home. And that's why they have to give the framework, the time framework for people to work within. But I think for us here in Kenya, our government gave us a grace time or period to ensure that we do no harm to the children. And it began in 2017, 16, 17, 18 to present is when they have asked us to go for 10 years. But this 10 years is enough time for any given institution to put in place what is needed. For instance, we encourage the CCIs to ensure that their integration process starts from the time they admit a child in the care institution. So they should not sit and wait until a child is maybe 3, 4, 5 years in the institution for them to start thinking of reintegration. And always we know it's possible because children cases are different. There are children whose cases might take short time. There are those whose cases might take long time. But that doesn't mean that we have to hurry, because remember, one of the principles, do no harm. and it should be in the best interest of a child, and the government knows that. So it's all about encouraging all the stakeholders to ensure that, yes, we all collaborate and participate in this journey of seeing how children can go back to the families. And the consequence will be, if you are not working within the minimum standards, then for sure, yes, then the consequences will apply. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Sister Delvin. It's connected to a question that's been posted. This question says that the children's officers keep referring children to residential care, meaning they still need some care. But if the government is serious about care reform, what can we do to help them support us so that we can embrace care reform? I'm going to pose this question and give it a little nuance and ask our respondents, how are you helping your government, whether the national level or the local level, to embrace care reform? So how do you help your local officials and even your national? How are you helping governments with care reform? I'm going to ask Sister Euphrasia to, I know she's had quite a bit of involvement in that area.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, and our dear listeners. For the case of Uganda is really different from Kenya. Our government has not yet talked of closing the homes. What they are in for is that there will always be some emergencies. For instance, a child is dumped at the door of a church. So this child must be saved by someone, by a home. And so for us, they are talking of repurposing the big structures, but leaving a section for emergencies. For instance, if a home was accommodating 50 children, you just leave a section for 5 children in case of an emergency, but repurpose the whole institution into community-based activity that will still benefit the community around. As far as our government is concerned, we are lucky that they support us instead, because if we have a religious congregation that is not compliant, they work with us as an association to make sure we go together, we visit the superior general, the owner, or the bishop, or the superior general, the owner of the home, to come to terms. But at the moment, as I talk, I'm proud to say that almost 100% of the religious in Uganda, those who are registered under our association, they are compliant. And so we are seeing more and more children going to families. So the government is in support with what we are doing.
Thank you, Sister Euphrasia. We have a question about how can religious congregations in other African countries come along? So I'm going to wait till we get to Sister Niluka towards the end, who's going to talk about CCCI and its work and ongoing efforts. So we'll hold that question for the time being. And we're going to begin to wind down now. And I'm going to ask each of our panelists and Nicole for just one final sentence, one final message, and then we'll turn things back over to Sister Niluka. And so, Sister Catherine, if you're ready, could you share your one final sentence or with those who are gathered here? And come off of mute. Looks like Sister Catherine is going to have to take a look. Oh, now she's off of mute.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you so much to our listeners. Care reforms, the process is quite challenging, But then the benefit of seeing this child in a loving family is what is much more important than the artificial love that we give these children in our child care facilities. So it needs a lot of effort from all of us to ensure that we take this child back into the home. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. Sister Delvin, your final few words for those who are listening. You must unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Kathleen, and all our dear listeners from around the world. What I will say is that care reform is possible. It's very possible, though it's a journey. And it needs dedication, it needs unity of all of us as stakeholders and collaboration. Thank you, Kathleen.
Sister. Thank you, Sister Delvin. And your final word or two, Sister Euphrasia?
To our dear listeners, I also echo that child care reform transitioning from residential care to family care is possible because we have tested the waters and we know that in order to reach there, you must make sure that you win the hearts of the stakeholders that I talked about. Otherwise, you'll get some resistance and then you will not succeed. So work towards winning the hearts of the key stakeholders so that you can succeed because they are very important in the journey to have a child safe back to a family. Thank you. Test it and you will prove.
Thank you, Sister. And a final word, Nicole.
Thank you. I would affirm everything the sisters were saying, and I can only say, being on the journey together with the sisters on Catholic Care for Children since the past 2 years, I really am impressed by their hard work and commitment, and it shows it's possible, and it's a journey, as it was already said, in the process, and every child has its own story, and every family is unique, so it's really, there is no solution for all, but together it is possible.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you to our panelists. Sister Niluka, back over to you.
Thank you, Kathleen, for your excellent moderation. We extend our heartfelt thanks to our panelists, Sisters Delvin, Euphrasia, Catherine, and the consultant, Nicole Moran, as well as our moderator, Kathleen Mahoney, for graciously accepting our invitation to participate in today's webinar. Your valuable contributions have undoubtedly enriched the experience of our webinar participants on the journey towards care reform. Dear friends, we have almost reached the end of the webinar. So what were the key takeaways from this webinar? Our speakers have provided valuable insights. They emphasized that care reform is possible and achievable. Winning the hearts and minds of the people for care reform is essential as changing mindsets to embrace the new is the most challenging yet crucial aspect. People need the capacity and skills to navigate these changes in the care sector. Once we are equipped with these capacities, we can recognize family strengthening as a key solution to this problem. This realization leads us to understand that we cannot work in isolation and highlights the need to partner and collaborate with other stakeholders to find a holistic solution for our children. Thanks to our panelists for sharing your experiences and enlightening us today. Friends, we understand that you may have many concerns as you listen to this conversation. Unfortunately, our limited time today does not allow us to address all of these concerns. Therefore, we encourage you to continue this conversation within your own circles, whether it be with your leaders, colleagues working in care institutions, or any other stakeholders involved in the care sector. Additionally, if you require support or wish to connect with our leaders, please don't hesitate to reach out. I am more than happy to facilitate that connection whenever you need it. As you know, CCCI is committed to supporting religious for care reform. For this, we have created a series of online training courses to support you in navigating the shift. Currently, we offer 2 online courses, the foundational, moving toward family solution course, and the more advanced family for every child course. So far, 5 groups have successfully completed this basic course in English. So far, we had the courses only in English. Looking ahead to the next year, we have scheduled this course 3 times, starting from January 2024. The good news is that starting next year, we offer the same courses for the Spanish-speaking groups. To access detailed information about these training courses, please visit our CCCI website and stay updated through our social media channels. Also, I have your email IDs. I will share the course information with you when they are on. So we realize that we are at different stages on this journey towards care reform. We need to walk together in sharing and learning. So CCCI online training courses are ideal platforms for learning and sharing and to connect with the wider group of religious who walk on the same path. So we invite you to engage with our courses and connect with the CCC groups worldwide. Also, we could be delighted to hear about your experiences, your stories from this journey. Kindly share them with us. So thank you, friends, for being part of this enlightening webinar. We look forward to more conversations like this type of conversations in the future. So once again, thank you for your participation. God bless you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye.
Gianluca.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good enriching. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye-bye,
sister.
Sister
Very
Judith.
educative. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Nilu.